Welcome to the Fractured Families podcast. I'm Charity, your dedicated parental alienation coach, here to guide and support families as they navigate the challenges of high conflict divorces and custody battles. On this podcast, we'll share insights, practical strategies, and hope for those on the journey toward healing and justice. Whether you're personally experiencing these challenges or just want to learn more about the complexities of parental alienation and custody disputes, you're in the right place. You are not alone. This is the Fractured Families podcast, where every voice matters and every story is heard. And if you find my conversation helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us reach more families who need it. Thank you for joining the Fractured Families podcast. This is your host, Charity. I have with me Chris Markraff, who is going to share who's going to be sharing his story about the alienation he's faced and being separated from his two daughters for the last 2 years. Chris will be telling us what he's been through from the family court system, how he got to this point, and where he's at. So, Chris, thanks for joining. And why don't you go ahead and just get us started. Tell us a little bit about your story, how you realized it was parental alienation, what got you here, and what are next steps for you.
Well, I was with the mother of my children for about 10 years. And I guess best I can figure, looking back at everything, is that she's either straight out a narcissist, or I think part of what happened was she carried some trauma into, I think her mom maybe alienated her from her dad. They were divorced, and I never had seen her dad angry, but he died early, just kind of watching his family from the outside looking in. But she kind of carried a lot of trauma because I guess basically he told her she'd never really amount to anything because he wanted her to be a boy and be an engineer, this, that, and the other thing. And I carried my own trauma into it too, so I wasn't really equipped to deal with, her needs, and she wasn't equipped to deal with mine. But it feels like she kind of actively undermined me throughout the relationship. I've got an 8-acre farm property that I was working on making into a home for us, and she really never had any interest in it or really, actively supported it. But now, after the separation, it just kind of, I kept operating under the assumption that she was, valued the father in our children's life, and she would operate in a manner that whatever issues we had just would get set aside, and we would do what we needed to do to, do the best we could do to co-parent our children. But it just, every chance she gets, it seems like she just could care less, from making reports that don't need to be made, refusing to do mediation, refusing to sit down and speak with me and, find a path to move forward. She just basically decided she owns our children and I don't get a say and I got no rights. And I don't know, she basically, I isolated. I did. I isolated away from them. There'd be times I'd kind of try to go to my family a little bit, but, she is always a good student. She's never been in any trouble. She follows all the rules, but physiologically, her being a workaholic to prove her dad wrong and sucking down a pot of coffee all day is physiologically doing the same thing I was doing, isolating and all that. Just one's more acceptable than the other, because now I'm 2 years into this, and my family's just finally starting to see that she's not all rainbows and sunshine either. And, I get castigated all the time because I broke the law or I stepped through these orders and shit. But everywhere I go, no one can tell me morally or ethically what I've done wrong, besides stand up and say they don't have the right to keep my children from me, barring an allegation of me being a danger to them. And all these charges now are through text messages, basically begging to see our children. And it's just frustrating that all these resources that get used to keep me away from our children, and they're tasked with making rulings based on the best interest of our children, where anyone with any critical thinking skills can see that nothing that they're doing makes any sense for me to reintegrate into society, or, use the money that I keep pissing away to keep my freedom, to go to their college fund or anything that would like make the outlook for my future to look any better. At the end of the day, I want to see her do well. And I guess I was operating under the false assumption that she could give two shits about like my well-being just for no more than the image of our daughter's father, you know. But that is where I had a lot of maybe cognitive dissonance, kind of coming to terms with she could care less. She was involved with someone for 3 to 6 months before she manipulated a response out of me and basically cried wolf. And I knew it never felt right. And I reached out and tried to get protection from my family, from these lawyers, from the court. And it's just like I knew they were crooked to begin with, but I didn't realize how, I don't know, it's depraved. It's a depraved system. They could
So,
care
Chris,
less,
how old were the children when the marriage ended and you two decided to get divorced?
Roughly 6 and 3. We were never married, actually.
Okay. So the kids were 6 and 3.
I did sign all the recognition of parentage and all that stuff too. And then when I petitioned for parenting time, then the judge said that I have to establish my rights. And I said my rights should have already been established through that. And I said, my understanding is you're born with rights and you establish principles, but it's all on Zoom. So they just hang up on you and move you out a few months and nothing ever gets figured out. And they don't, there's a 25% rebuttable presumption of parenting time that should have been an automatic until a final order was agreed upon. But they keep you down, they keep you incarcerated, they keep you poor. I mean, I spent $5,000 to get out of jail, and then I lost out on another $12,000 of income in those 2 months that I sat for text messages that they won't even. So for my evidentiary hearing, I told them that they need to provide me with a published set of guidelines on what's acceptable communication, because nothing I said in any of those text messages was outside the realm of what you can say in mediation or alternative dispute resolution, and they refuse to do it. They just keep stringing me along, and I got 9 outstanding felonies at the moment for text messages asking to see my children on a parenting app. 2 of them came from, I waited till February to bring them their Christmas presents. When I was able to catch them at the skating rink, my oldest daughter came running across, jumped up into my arms and started crying. It was the daddy. She jumps up into my arms. She starts crying. I give them their Christmas presents. I make my way. I didn't break any provisions of the DANCO. She still called the police. It's an automatic arrest, and 2 more felonies for bringing my daughters their Christmas presents. And I didn't break any provision of the DANCO, but I got to go again, disprove a negative because she's anxious. Well, I'm anxious too when 6 cops come and put their hand on me and come and arrest me. Just because she puts her hands on me with the police doesn't mean she's not putting hands on me and abusing me. But there's
Right.
zero sympathy for men out there. There's virtually nowhere to turn to that I found in 2 years of looking. And thankfully now I'm in a different part of the state that actually has resources. So I'm just looking in every direction that I can find to find an advocate or an ally that can help me through this, because they can do anything they want until you take it to the appeal process. And they're just so complacent that nobody's going to question their authority or stand up to them, that it's just, they don't like it. They know they're doing wrong, but as soon as you stand up to it, then you're insubordinate, or you're standoffish, or you're this, that, or the other thing.
So when you separated and the kids were 3 and 6, did you immediately lose access to the children, or does she at any point after the separation try to give you some parenting time?
Well, so I was always split between my property and the house that we had in town, and I was constantly having things stolen from me. And I ended up having my construction trailer stolen with like $10,000+ worth of tools. And that turned into an argument that I yelled at her, and then she ended up filing an OFP. Well, then she ended up marking the box with the kids on it, because apparently the people at the court told her to do, which they're not supposed to be giving advice to anybody, first of all. Second of all, she's since admitted it to be a mistake. I've got text messages of her and her mom and her best friend laughing at me because while I was crying, moving my stuff out of the houses and stuff. And to me, that's depraved. I don't really care what they think about me, but the fact that 3 grown women are that giddy about a family being destroyed, I think is a little bit depraved. And I think they're taking a little too much pleasure in all of it. And, those were messages I was actually able to show some of my family too, but like I can't even blame them because I allowed her to gaslight me for how many years, and I just accepted bullshit answers and responses, and I just accepted that it had to be me and I knew better, and I should have confronted it a year or two earlier, but I knew that it probably meant the end of our family or end of our relationship or whatever the case may be. She did end up dropping that OFP, but then it was just like, then I had to communicate third party, and that was just a big pain, and it was a hassle. And she called it a boundary, but it was just her being a controlling, I don't know, and I keep praying against it, but I just can't come to a better conclusion than a narcissist or vindictive because of her dad and her ex-husband and all that. And as much as I hope that's not the case, like, because I took that on as my own burden because I don't want our daughters to despise their mother for her keeping them from me. And I took that on as my own burden, and I can't control that anymore. But I allowed that to, destroy me further with my reactivity. But I just, again, I just thought like, well, golf, we could just have a conversation like 2 grown adults, why can't, and everyone keeps saying, well, you can't make her do anything. You can't make her do anything. Well, why can she snap her fingers and I get arrested and thrown in jail for however long and all these fines and fees and all these other expenses and resources, but they can't sit us down in a room with a cop there to make her feel safe if I'm so dangerous? Like, that's the thing I don't understand. I mean, I understand it, but it's just, it's really frustrating when you can't even have an opinion. Like, I haven't been able to basically have an opinion for 2 years that I can voice to her in any meaningful, accessible way. And then even mediation was a joke. It didn't accomplish anything. She was absolutely intransigent, and just refused any concessions, like, I mean, we had phone calls lined up last December and she took those away for no reason, no explanation. And then that's when I waited the 2 months and to give our daughters their Christmas presents, and then from there, I think I've seen them about 4 times since February.
So when this all started and you separated, you had some access to the children at that point, right?
Very limited and completely upon her discretion.
And so you've seen them 4 times. What are those visits like? And are they supervised, or how do you see them now?
No, they weren't. They were mostly with my parents. I don't know. They were never really ready to go back when it was time to be done. I know 1 or 2 occasions they were crying. They didn't want to go home. They wanted more time with their dad. They're being kept from their grandparents. And they've got like 20 some cousins and stuff they're being kept from. And my dad's 83. He's on oxygen, and like in some of those last messages now that they're trying to charge me for, I said, at least bring them and see their grandparents, But then the last time my parents had them around Christmas time, and my mom let me say hi to the girls and all that stuff. And my mom got a big message from her that they can't be trusted, and they know they know that she doesn't want me talking to them, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and I asked my mom, I'm like, do you think you did anything wrong? Well, no. I'm like, well, are you going to confront her on it so then I can use you as a witness in court? Well, no, I don't think so. They're all so damn scared of her. And I'm like, well, then it's just strictly my word against hers. Unless you guys go ask her some of these questions, that she has to come up with some sort of logical, reasonable answer as to why she's keeping the children from their father who wants to be with them and that they love and they want to be with. And then she's going to have to explain that in front of a jury. Mm-hmm. But they, and I've given up on trying to have them do that. I am working with a advocate lady out of Mississippi that she works with like family law reform, and she's a PhD and she can be a professional witness and all that shit too. But like in my current situation, like I I can't even go to my property to sell some of my stuff because there's that technically a warrant out at the moment, so I can get funds to help find people who can help me in that. And, I've got a property that's bought and paid for. I've got 50 some plus $1,000 of tools, but I got zero liquid money. And that's the really frustrating part. She gets to keep her job. She's already involved with someone else. She keeps the kids. She keeps the house. I'm out on the streets homeless. I spent every penny on that property trying to build a home for our family. And that's the tough part, when I'm getting back on my feet and I'm starting to see a light again at the end of the tunnel, which is something that 7, 8, 9 months ago, it was pretty dark. And I understand, I see why men go and do some of the things they do. I would never condone it, but I understand why they snap, because they don't see any other option and they just want their voice to be heard at the end of the day.
So, when did you start realizing it was parental alienation, and how did you learn about it? Because we talked a little bit
I don't
prior
know,
about how there's awareness, and so how did you get to that point?
it was kind of something that was in my radar for a couple of years previous, and that's some of the stuff I tried getting introduced in some of the first court hearings. Was like our phone records of like me begging her to not kill our daughter's father or the image because of her contempt and her whatever for her and her unresolved issues with her dad. Her dad passed and they never completely made amends and whatever. And she's like her mom's best friend. And like so at one point in time, shortly after our youngest daughter was born, she had told me that she despised our children. And I went to her mother to try to understand how to talk to her daughter or connect with her better. And she says, "Oh yeah, that ain't shit. My parents told me they wish they never had any fucking one of us." It's like, because I finally thought one time that I couldn't be in the wrong, a mother despising their children, that should be like the wrong outlook. I thought one time I was going to be right. And that's where some like hypervigilance and learned helplessness comes in. Cause like all my life, no matter how right or ethical I felt, or like integrity and compassionately based, it's like somehow I'm always wrong, or I always get misunderstood one way or another. I'm a man, I'm a carpenter. I never got taught how to express my feelings and have emotional intelligence. I learned all that shit in the last 2 years in a jail cell, reading psychology books and searching hard in the Bible, to get an understanding so I can communicate it better and try to find a way to use my words and not, my anger or whatever. But my anger was feelings of not being heard or not being whatever, that's something I'm still working on unpacking. But so out at the property, I would always have my earbuds and I was always trying to listen to something educational, TED Talks, or just anything that kind of came across the algorithm. I'm fairly aware, and sometimes I wish I could just be blind and ignorant and just go be happy working a 9 to 5 with no true purpose besides drinking some beers on the weekend and shit. But I've never been able to do that. Like I know that we could have such a better world if all this bureaucracy and the greed and whatever it is that compels people to just be trash. I mean, we're kind of a trash species. Unfortunately, there are a lot of great people out there, but I think they just get overwhelmed with all the negative stuff they see day in and day out, or they hear about, how many times do you hear about good things happening? You do hear about them here and there, but they sure don't promote that out the way they do all the fear and the division and the tribal mentality. And
Yeah.
but I mean, just
So
I don't know.
tell me what the family courts experience has been like. I mean, you've alluded to it, right? And you've talked about it, but so you're separated from your daughters by their mother's actions. How did she petition to the court first that she wanted you to have any access or limited access? What happened there?
No, she never did. She never did anything. Like, finally, after however long, it just came to the point where she wasn't cooperating. And so then I petitioned the court for parenting time.
Okay.
And then she basically came back with, she does human resources. So she basically took what should have been like a parent, like it's got 2 lines on the form, and she went above and beyond and like did a whole attachment about like, basically it says that I got angry about 3 times in 10 years and I threw a bowl at a wall, and I, at one point in time, I punched a hole in the wall and says, and which, yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. I punched the wall. I've never hit this woman. And yeah, was it maybe the right thing to do? Yeah, maybe it wasn't. But again, I didn't touch her. My oldest daughter has seen me yell at her one time for a matter of less than 10 seconds. She's put in there that our daughter displays excessive aggression, even though she's had complete control over her for the last year, which, fathers regulate aggression in children. And the lack of me being there is probably why she's shown some of that, and probably some frustration and unmet emotional consoling or reasoning or explaining or whatever the case may be. I sent you some of those attachments, which are like 2 different pictures of like a dozen or so different drawings that my oldest daughter did. And I had showed those to the mom, and I said, this is pathetic. Our daughter shouldn't have to be proving that she loves me, or like having to show proof that she loves me to that regard. It's almost, it's sad, because like, I think that at that time she felt she needed to prove her love, as like she wasn't good enough to have me around, or I didn't want to be around her, whatever the case may be. You understand what I'm kind of trying to say? And she just really didn't care about it. And me and her kind of come from a different mindset, where she's like super black and white. Like she's a smart woman, but she doesn't really know how to think. She's been told what to think, and she's done very well inside the system of indoctrination, where I've been failed by just about every institution. I probably am borderline ADHD, and it should have been addressed a long time ago. I was always bored in school. I wasn't challenged enough. By 6th grade, I was moved into the highest math class, and by 9th grade, I was in like the sit down and shut up, don't cause any trouble, and you'll pass math class. And then just like with my family, friends, and kind of the town we were in, like it was all blue collar. We were just taught to work hard and all that stuff. I bought my first house at 19. I've been self-employed doing construction for the last 15 years. I equitied against that house in town, and I let the bank foreclose on the thing. I got plenty of skills and talents and all that stuff, but here I sit, and they're all just being wasted away instead of like going towards our daughter's future.
So prior to the separation, your relationship with your daughters was that of, as a father should be, an active role.
Oh yeah, I'd bring them out to the property all the time. I'd have them driving on the tractor. I got a zip line set up down in the grove for them. I got like Hot Wheels out there. I got them like 16 kitties. We'd go out, we'd play in the mud, we'd play in the snow, we'd do the zip line, I'd show them how to drive, and we'd go on little nature walks and all that stuff. We'd rake, and we'd burn bonfires and stuff. And like anytime they were out there, I'd stopped everything I was doing to go do some sort of activity with them. And they were always in heaven out there. They just, kids thrive. And they would climb ladders and stuff, just fearless of heights and stuff. But like, she's like literally allergic to the world, and she's kind of a city baby. And she's like, she's killing their creativity. Like, a job as parents is to give them a safe enough perimeter to go kind of explore, to some extent dangerously, and learn what they need to learn. But it's just frustrating not being able to go to, like, I haven't been able to go to their skating shows, which I know caused my ex issues with her dad. Both of us, our parents not coming to our events when we were children and stuff. And now for her to keep me from those events when she knows that it caused her emotional trauma from her dad not showing up to her things it's really frustrating, and it's counterintuitive that she would put hurting me. Like I keep holding out hope that she's truly doing it because she truly believes that she's protecting our children, but I just can't see it. Like with all those messages I sent on that last text, I also sent a scientific paper that was signed off on by like 105 psychologists citing the irreparable and immediate damage to children that don't have a father figure in their father in the home and or time with. And I had another opportunity where I could have had them up on a parade float, and she denied that, and instead she took them to tie-dye some t-shirts at her aunt's place that they could have done any rainy day of the year. Their aunt lives in the same town. And I said, put it to a vote and see what they want to do. And I said, as a matter of fact, if you want to, you can take your daughter and our daughters, and I'll go sit on the damn street, and you guys can have a mother-daughter day just to give them the experience, and I'll just extricate myself and watch from the sidelines. And she still just never even responded in time, and it's just like, that's the kind of, and then like these last few times she was trying, on those messages to reintegrate with the girls, she wanted to start out with like 2 hours every other weekend or something. And I'm like, really? The teachers and the daycare lady and the babysitter get more time than I do? And she wanted me to pass like a hair follicle test and all that, which I have no problem doing any of that.
So when you do see the kids, it's not directly that she gives you access, it's through family.
Yeah, she would just usually drop them off at my parents' place or something.
Do your children call her new partner dad? Do you know?
I have no idea. I have no idea his past, his background. I have no idea. So she even blocked me on everything on Facebook. So like, I don't even have pictures of our daughters. Like what I sent you is about what I got, because she had all the photos and all the albums and all that stuff. So I can barely even see pictures of my children. So there's no logical reasoning for the safety of our children for that, or for the denial of phone calls. She'd have complete oversight, censorship of phone calls, So there's absolutely no reason that I can't be having phone calls, but I can't reach out to her to try to set those up, Because for a year they had the OFP that said I could have third-party communication, but then they also had a DENCO in place that said I couldn't communicate any way, anyhow, any shape, any form. And since she didn't have a lawyer, in a roundabout way, they took away my First Amendment right to my intimate association with our children. And that's not supposed to attach to the marriage, and that's not supposed to be, barring an allegation of me being a danger to our children, something. So in a roundabout way, because I couldn't communicate with her, they took away my right to be with our children.
You have an advocate you're working with in Mississippi. What does that look like for you? How is she going to help you get to where you need to be to try to have more parenting time with your children?
Nothing great at the moment. Like she says, from all the police reports, she says she can see it, fairly clearly what she's doing. But like, she says that like, barring like some real evidence, which like the prosecutor wants to say that her text messages are private. So I gotta challenge that too, because she's used text messages to get me arrested. So if she brought those into evidence, she has to expand those to include all the other messages, not just the ones that she nitpicks through. She brought that into existence. So she's, like, that's shit that they got to give me. But what they've been able to do is, so when I first went into jail, they juggled me between a couple different public pretenders. And then I was able to finally find a private lawyer, and he's since been disbarred for fraud. He didn't show up. He didn't do his job. He didn't represent me properly. He took a bullcrap plea. He didn't really explain all my options. I've got records of me trying to call him and my parents like 700 plus times and never getting a pick. They forced a plea down my throat 2 days after I had surgery when I was high on OxyContin. I told the judge that I was under the influence of drugs, and she says, I've made the determination that you're not, which I've since told her is treason. So I had asked for advisory counsel, and they told me I was too competent to get advisory counsel. And then I went in and I accused her of ruling from the bench and overstepping her authority. And boom, they hit me with a competency evaluation. So that was another automatic 30 days sitting in jail, you know, losing out on good income. And I knew it would come back. I'm fully competent, but I self-represented at that point. I asked to have my own independent observer in on there. They denied me even trying to set that up. And then that independent evaluators made a bunch of assumptions and presumptions, like I'm just trying to take this to trial so I can, as a domestic abuser would do, intimidate my victim with the prosecutor and the judge denied all my requests for past transcripts and police reports that I could have that evaluator look at for mitigating circumstances and reasons for why things were the way they were. They blanket denied all of that. And so I got to challenge all that. But, I've got no liquidity. I can't go even sell some of my stuff. And I'd love to do like a GoFundMe or find an advocate or a pro bono lawyer, but I don't even know where to really start asking. I feel that I feel like if they would give me my chance to speak and submit, motions and correspondence is better. I could do better than these lawyers because they don't care. They're all just following a script and they just pretend that they're trying to help you. And at the end of the day, they already know what they're going to try and give you or what they're willing to give you. So I just as soon pour my heart out in front of a jury, and wherever it falls, it falls. The evaluator asked me, well, what am I going to do if they offer me a plea? I said, at this point, they can wipe their ass with it. I've taken 2 pleas with the understanding that I would have access to my children, and both times I never did. If my ex was an alcoholic and she was in treatment, and I did, and she was doing good in treatment, and I denied her seeing the kids, I would be called a piece of shit for not facilitating the best possible chance of her by maintaining that bond with the children. But as a man, no one cares. I feel that our daughters need their father, and that's important. But everywhere I turn, and explain to people what she's doing is child abuse, no one bats an eye. And it's literally physiological child abuse, and nobody cares. Is women have zero accountability and no scrutiny upon them, and it's encouraged that they do everything that they can do to wreck their ex-partner. And I don't understand it. I've never been in a group of men that says, drag her through the dirt and do everything you can do to destroy her. I don't get.
So as we come closer to an end, what are your next steps? Is there a set hearing date at all yet?
No, because that advisory council, I'm lucky if I can get a hold of him every 3 weeks or a month. So that's pretty much a joke too. I've been going through these Power of People Leadership Institute and various men's support groups, and doing everything I can do for there's a lot of resources in this county. There really is, but I've only been in this county now for 6 weeks, and it's I'm in the Twin Cities now in Minnesota and county, but they kind of set the standard for the whole state for resources and legal aid and advocacy and all that kind of stuff. But I'm just very slowly getting connected with those avenues.
Great. So any last thoughts? Any thoughts that you have for parents? What tips would you offer to them to help in this situation?
I guess just don't give up. And for me, I'm trying to do better with finding parts of the system that actually can be trusted or can actually help me get a voice, instead of, being so scared of the system because it just has generally been so much used against me. But I'm going to try and get a guardian ad litem involved so my children have a voice. But I've heard a lot of potentially bad things about going that avenue too. And but people like you, they are out there, and anything you look hard enough for, you'll find. And if you focus on the positive and just keep making that next step and holding out hope, there are people out there who really do care, and there is awareness that's starting to come to it. And at the end of the day, the children will make their own. The children will know their own truth at some point in time. It's unfortunate that's got to be this way. I've seen so many stories that are, pretty sad, but if that's something that she's going to have to explain to them why she did everything, or why they may not have had as much chance to know their grandparents, or whatever the case may be. I journal. So if something, my
Good.
brother dropped dead at 47 years old, healthy as could be. I'm going to be 42 in March. God forbid, something. No one's guaranteed tomorrow. And I know my oldest daughter was old enough to know a fair amount of our memories and how much I love her. And regardless if something happens, she'll be able to pass that on to her younger sister, and I journal as much as I can. So if something does happen, they can go back through that at some point in time. I know I did a lot of coloring and tried sending them little letters when I was in jail. My niece was friends with her daughter, her oldest daughter, from a different marriage, and she told me all those letters and stuff went in a drawer. Our daughters never saw them and stuff. That's really frustrating. And then, I went and tried to talk to her mom. Her mom supports it, just has a big smug attitude. So I absolutely convinced that her mom alienated her and lied to her about the whole situation of her parents, So I'm trying really hard to forgive and not hold resentment. It's just frustrating that she thinks she owns our children and that only her point of view is valid. And whatever, it is what it is. If this is what it took for me to get out of my deal and grow and learn and be the father that my daughters need, I guess I'll do what I need to do, come out the other side, and they'll know.
Good. Well, we know that parental alienation does have generational trauma, so it's not surprising that if she was alienated and her mother portrayed these similar behaviors and tactics, then she learned it from that environment. And unfortunately, you're on the negative end of that and are your children. And we know that obviously you've been reading scientific literature and scientific studies that as much as it negatively impacts the father, the true victims are the children because of the long-term consequences they face when they are separated from a loving parent.
I did get connected in with a nonprofit called Begin Anew, and they do training in prisons for like harm reduction, and they also do like forensic accreditation for people who've been through this stuff. So I am going to be pursuing education, and somehow or another I'm going to come through the other side and try and find a voice or a platform or a way to advocate for other men and women, because it's truly ruining our society.
Yep, it is. Well, Chris, thank you for joining and thank you for sharing your story. We appreciate it. And thanks again. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Fractured Families podcast. I hope our conversation has provided you with support, understanding, and actionable insights to help you navigate your own family challenges. Remember, healing is a journey, and reaching out for help is a sign of strength. You're not alone. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your support helps us reach more families in need. You can contact me on social media at Parental Alienation is Real and visit our website for additional resources and ways to get involved. Stay strong, stay connected, and keep fighting for the family bonds that matter most. Until next time, take care and stay resilient.